He called me up one day and goes, "Bring your racquetball stuff." I go, "Why?" He goes, "We're going to interview a sales guy." I go, "Okay, fine." So we get on the court and there's a sales guy and he turns to me and he goes, "Hit him."
With what?
With the ball. With the ball.
Okay.
Well, I nailed the guy in the back of the leg and he's not happy at all. And Paul just looks at me and grins.
Welcome to the Kingdom Makers Podcast, a show where profit is just the beginning. Kingdom Makers empowers leaders to have purpose and to create businesses that transform lives for generations to come. My name is Travis McDowell, and I'm joined here today with my co-host, Doug McLeod. And we're going to tackle a tough question today, which is how do you demonstrate courage at a critical crossroads in business or in life? We're blessed to be joined by my friend, Jim Rouzer. Jim is the co-owner of Mum Products, Mum Craft, Promac. He's also recently launched a new venture called Earth Rings. And so Jim is also a serial entrepreneur, but really he is a mentor to me, and he is a leader that we can all emulate to be. We are excited to hear more about his journey to this point in the crossroads, and also about some of his new product ideas and how he wants to finish strong to complete his professional legacy, but continue on as a leader. Jim serves in many roles as a leader in his life. The one that I've been blessed to meet him at is with a faith-based CEO group, peer advisory group called Convene, where Jim is one of the anchors that mentors many other business leaders. And Jim, just happy to have you here today and can't wait to have the conversation. How are you today?
Thank you. That's certainly a pretty nice build-up.
I do my best.
I hope I can live up to your comments. I'm happy to be here, happy to share some stories, and looking forward to just spending a little bit of time with you.
Yeah, it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining today, Jim. And just heard you just recently had a 45th wedding anniversary. Congratulations. That's amazing.
That is pretty exciting. Woohoo!
Entrepreneur hack: marrying up is the single best way that you can be a successful entrepreneur. So that's you, Jim.
Yes, I've done well. I've done very well, believe me. Yeah, and she keeps me on track too, which is also a good thing.
That's good.
That's great. Jim, you and I, we spent some time together at the last couple of years at the Global Leadership Summit, and had the opportunity at a couple of the Convene meetings to join in with the group. But maybe you can help me and our listeners get up to speed on you and where you're at with your businesses today.
Sure. So as you said, we've had this business Promac, which is sort of the overriding company, for about 43 years. We just celebrated an anniversary in September. We are an entrepreneurial-based company. We have a warehouse and distribution side of the business, which is sort of the core. We also, for that particular business, we ship other people's products. We work quite a bit with people like Amazon and Ring and Motorola, and we support what they do in the retail space. So if they have displays or any of those kind of things in the retail setting, we ship new product introductions to them, as well as we do all the repair or replace if there's any issues out there. About 13 years ago, we bought a company called Mum Products, which is a distributor to about 25,000 mom and pop convenience stores or liquor stores, and we supply them packaging that they can do, 6-packs, 8-packs, whatever that may be, as well as a lot of the sundries that they would typically use, bottle openers and koozies and all those kind of things, signage. And then, as you referred to a few minutes ago, we sort of looked at the market and realized that we've been fighting plastic for a long, long time. And so we decided to do a sustainable ring that would be replacing plastic for cans primarily, and our first venture into that is in the Canadian market, which we're doing pretty well in, and we're just introducing it to the U.S. market right now. So that's the business side. A little bit of background: I started off my career as a shop teacher, did that for a couple years. Then I got into the printing industry through R.R. Donnelley & Son, which at that time was the largest printer in the world. and sort of had my taste of working for a big corporation, which lasted about 6 years or so, and realized that that's not where I belonged and not where God wanted to put me. So, in 81, we started our own business and sort of went from there. So it's been a good ride so far.
Well, that's that is a terrific introduction. Thank you for sharing all that, and we'll keep digging into some of those elements today. So I was telling Doug this week. So there's a session that Charlie Munger hosted years ago where somebody asked him about being an entrepreneur, and your story about having a little run in corporate America and then obviously going a different direction will fit well with this thought. But he said that being an entrepreneur was best for those that like to pack their own parachute. And knowing you as well as I do, you would probably fall even into you want to make your own parachute and then pack your own parachute. But tell us a little more about that, about, hey, what made you kind of to drive you towards that entrepreneurship and become an entrepreneur and start your own businesses?
I've probably had two major things in my business career that have sort of made me get the confidence, if you will. I was teaching for a couple of years, and I was teaching shop classes. We had a class of all girls. This was back in the late 70s. Yes, I'm showing how old I am. And at that point, we had finished the course curriculum, and we had about a month left, and leather was pretty big back then. So I told all the girls, if you buy the kits, I'll teach you how to make the tools, and I'll also teach you how to make the dies. And we did that. So they were excited. The end of the year, they all were wearing belts and handbags and all that kind of stuff. But I got called in front of the principal's office and told I couldn't do that. You go, why couldn't I do that? They go, well, because it's not in the curriculum. And I said, well, what would you prefer I do? And they said, well, study hall. And I said, that's not going to work. So I think I realized at that point, in that circumstance, that the administration was for the sake of administration, not for the sake of teaching kids. So I moved on and I went to R.R. Donnelly and Son, which was a very large printing company. And I came from a very small college. Millersville College in Pennsylvania was primarily a teacher's college. And my expertise was printing and photography. Well, when I joined the sales force at R.R. Donnelly and Son, almost everybody was from either Purdue or Notre Dame. And at that point, I was the small fish, and all these, people had all these credentials and stuff. So I went to the guy who was the head salesperson and said, can I follow one of your jobs all the way through? And I did. And he and I became best friends. And then I actually became his right hand. He wanted to go into management. I wanted to learn more about sales. So I traveled a lot, 200 days a year, supporting customers. But what it taught me is that I needed to look at another way, and I needed to look at not what sort of the world of, okay, I'm not with, Purdue, I'm not with Notre Dame, but I have talents and skills and I can go do that. So I think that was a learning curve for me. And it gave me the confidence to sort of see, okay, let's just go try stuff. And that's sort of where I followed my career up to now, is when there's a challenge out there, I'm all in pretty quickly. I make the decision, and I have a really good business partner. I think one of our talents is we can look at an opportunity and analyze very quickly if it's worth the time and worth the money, if we can make money doing it, and we can literally do that in a really short period of time. But I do think it's that personal drive and confidence that's allowed me to get there.
So, Jim, you're a builder. It's one of my favorite things about you. And when you're faced with challenges, you build your way out of them. And that's always a admirable trait. Everyone solves problems a little differently, and I know that's how you do yours. And we'll dig into that a little more. But when we ask some more specifically on the Earth Rings and some of the products you got there, but. You mentioned at the printing company at R.R. Donnelly that you had someone that maybe you got a little mentorship from, and I know that if you could take a snapshot of today and think back on the journey of getting from even back in those days or in the shop teaching days to today, oftentimes successful entrepreneurs and successful leaders had somebody open a door for them. That had that not happened, they wouldn't be where they are today. Do you have any stories or examples? Maybe it's expounding upon the R.R. Donnelley one, or maybe it's a different one where that's the case, where somebody opened a door for you that got you to where you're at today.
Well, I think the R.R. Donnelley one is a good start. His name is John Walter. He met me when I basically knocked on his door one day and said, hey, I want to follow one of your catalogs. I was in the catalog division, and the catalog happened to be Wilson Sporting Goods. And I was this neophyte high school teacher coming out of Chicago. And the connection was the gentleman that I student taught with, that I eventually took his place at that school, became the training director for R.R. Donnelley and Son out of Chicago. So that was my connection. Well, John took me under his wing because I was willing to learn, but I had a lot of knowledge on the printing side, which most of these people that came in did not. So what he did is he never held back of giving me opportunities and challenges. So it might be taking a customer traveling, which I hadn't traveled that much, and I'm going to a plant in Willard, Ohio, or Warsaw, Indiana, or Gallatin, Tennessee. And he didn't tell me how to do it, and he didn't tell me how to work with a customer. He just said, go. And it was all opportunity-based. And then he also challenged me on the relationship side of things because he expected me to develop the relationship with a customer. And I'm very much, especially now in my life as I've grown, I'm a relationship guy. I mean, I think relationships are what make life work, across the board. So he pushed me pretty hard. And there was lots of failure where I'd call him up and I go, I think I got us in trouble. And he goes, that's okay, I'll get you out of it. But then he would throw me right back into the fire. So those are the things that's one circumstance that really worked well for me. Another one is I joined, before we started our own company, I had I was with a marketing firm for a few years. And the guy who was the owner of the company was really interesting. He's based out of Milwaukee. And he called me up one day and goes, bring your racquetball stuff. I go, why? He goes, we're going to interview a sales guy. I go, okay, fine. So we get on the court and there's a sales guy and there's Paul Elias, who's the owner, and then myself. And I knew Paul pretty well and we're playing racquetball. And he turns to me and he goes, hit him. I go, oh. He goes, yeah.
With what?
With the ball. With the ball.
Okay.
Well, I nailed the guy in the back of the leg. And he's not happy at all. And Paul just looks at me and grins. And we're a little bit further in the game. Nobody's won yet. And he goes, hit him again. I go, really? Yeah. So I hit him again. This guy went nuts. Now, remember, he's on a job interview. So the game ends. Paul won. We're exiting the court. And Paul goes, you stay here. So he leaves with the guy. And then about 15 minutes later, Paul walks back in. I go, well, where's the guy? And he goes, he's not going to be joining us. And what I found is his method of trying to see how somebody works under pressure is to put them in a pressure situation. And his was either golf or racquetball for a salesperson. And that's how he weeded people out. And I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, or people that have guided me, I've learned, like when I'm hiring people, I ask pretty difficult questions, or I put them in situations that they might not be comfortable with. But I've hired some amazing people because we've sort of gone through all of that, glitter and niceties and everything else. We get down to the real question is, are they going to work or aren't they going to work? And it's done well for me. And those people will come back and tell you now it's done well for them also. So those are some of the people, maybe some of the circumstances. It's just sort of helped me be a better entrepreneur, and look for what are the right people, because you're only as good as the people that surround you.
Jim, you mentioned earlier about like being able to, you and your partner, you look at a situation, you analyze it. And it sounds like you've kind of learned how to do that through like an interviewing process a little bit, through some racquetball games. What's the kind of pressure cooker you might put somebody through? Because I go through, that's a challenge that I have with my team is how do we make sure that we've identified the person with the right values, and that's, we always look for the right questions to ask and the right situation. So How do you put someone through the pressure cooker through that process?
One thing, and it's typically not on the first interview, it's on a second interview. I try to get them outside of the office and take them someplace public and see how they treat people. If we're going to go to a store to pick up some medicine, or we're going to go to a lunch or something, I want to see, how do they handle the waiter? How do they handle the waitress? How do they handle the clerk? Do they open doors for the lady who's walking through the door? Don't they open the door for the ladies walking through? Another thing that I like to do is I say, describe to me what is one of your absolutely worst moments in business. And I've had some really good answers. Actually, one of my stars in the company right now, who really is probably our number 2, number 3 person, he said, I sat at my office. I was so overwhelmed. At the end of the day, I started crying in my own office. He said, I got in my car and I cried the whole way home. And it took me like 45 minutes to get home. And of course, the follow-up question is, okay, so what did you do? Because I slept on it. I woke up the next morning and went, get over myself. It's not that big of a deal. I'll figure out how to get this thing done and resolved. He drove back to work and he started back doing what he had to do. The right answer, because he admitted that he was really, having a problem to somebody that he doesn't know very well, being me and my team. And then he had the right answer that he went back and he resolved it and handled it from there. So that's some of the stuff that I do right now.
Well, I know one of the things that I admire about you so much is I know that the environment that you've created at the businesses that you've started, that you've told us about, I know that environment, when people are inside of it, they love being there. And the fact that you're asking them hard questions, or you're making it, difficult to get inside of that circle, the community that we like to talk about, in Doug and I's business, that's a good thing, because once you're in there, it's a really good spot to be, under that wing of protection. And I believe one of the biggest reasons for that is how you've integrated faith into your professional leadership style in your business. And I think that our listeners would love to hear a little bit about that. I mean, we talk about crossroads and being at a crossroads. I know that there was a time when you were at a crossroads with how to integrate business and faith. Can you tell us a little bit of that story, or tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll give you sort of 2 parts to this story. The first one, this was probably in the mid 1980s, and I was one of the lay leaders at church, working with pastors, and there was 2 pastors, and I was doing a lot of administrative help. Pastors are not always the best administrators, and I was sort of the guy at work that I asked the tough questions. I'm the one who had the hard conversations, and I found myself doing that in a church. And all of a sudden I realized, God put me here doing this at the church because he taught me how to do that in my business. So I got this transfer of, I was being put into God's house because he's already trained me how to do some stuff. And it was a place, the church particular at that time, really needed some of those skills. And I really thought that was a little bit of a revelation to me. A few years later, I was majorly stressed. And I'm in a warehouse. I'm walking down the aisle, and all of a sudden I get this tap on the shoulder, and God goes, go over in the aisle and pray. And I did. I literally walked down one of the aisles. Nobody was there. And I prayed about what the situation was. And I came back in the main aisle, and I went out and did my business. And that is a habit that I still have today, that I have learned that part of bringing faith to business is you have to handle yourself first. All right. If you have faith and you are willing to understand where that fits into your business, if you don't understand that personally, you're not going to understand it or be able to do a very good job publicly. So for me, it was praying a lot. One of a really good example of this, of how I started off in bringing it to business, is I had a guy who worked for us as a project manager, and he was a pastor in a church out in Oklahoma for about 15 years before he came back to Chicago and joined us. And I used to ask him if he would come sit in my office for a few minutes and pray with me. And typically there was another person in there because someone needed our prayers. And one day I said, hey, John, how do you feel about we invite the office in and anybody who wants to come in, because we had a lady who was going to be giving her kidney, donating a kidney to her husband the next day. So we did. And probably half of the office came in. And, we prayed over Karen, and, that worked fine. And I looked around and I could sort of tell the people who didn't show up, but it really gave me an opportunity over the next period of time to talk to them about that, because some said, boy, I'm not really comfortable with that at all. And the other ones, I came to a realization, with just being maybe naive, dumb, whatever, they have an entirely different background of mine. I was born and raised in a Christian church, Christian family. I had all this God knowledge. They had none. I mean, they had no relationship. They had never been to church. Their family had nothing to do with church. So the revelation for me was open my eyes and see what was going around with other people. So fast forward, because I was allowed to have those conversations. I do think God was working with me to have those conversations with people. Fast forward a couple of years, and we had a lady whose husband was severely ill, and he had a major brain tumor, and he was going under significant surgery the following day. So again, I invited the office to come in. We met in the conference room, and anybody who wants to come in, let's pray. Every single person showed up. Every person. And everybody joined in the prayer. We did a laying on of hands for her. And it was chilling to me that progress of, oh, we never talk about faith and we never do anything, to now the whole office is all in. And they're there for everybody. And everybody's individual faith or not faith every day came out. So I think that's how it sort of developed, if you will.
And I'm sure that it plays a huge role in decision making and how you lead, right? And how the others are learning to lead within your company.
It does. I mean, what really plays a big role is when you do things like reduction in force, or how you have to sometimes look at a person and say, you really need to change, or you can't treat people this way, or you can't treat a customer this way. I think because of the knowledge of the faith side of us as owners and the people in the management, I think that sort of handles itself now. They know that they are going to have to be very concerned. We have a situation right now where a lady that we're going to have to let go. Little bit of reduction in business is the right thing to do. But the very first comment of the management team, yeah, but what are we going to do to support her? And how are we going to handle her to make sure that she does get unemployment, to make sure we are taking care of her family? We make sure that everybody knows that she's being supported in any way possibly can. I bring a lot of that back to faith. I bring that back to where people know doing the right thing is part of this process.
Jim, it seems like in manufacturing, we know there's a lot of transactions taking place between suppliers and customers, and it seems like you've through your experiences and leading with prayer at your businesses and praying for your people, that you've had some really big revelations about leading a manufacturing company and leading a faith-driven business.
Yeah, Doug, I would say it's relations. It's all about the relationships. And if you almost ask anybody in my management team or the people I work with, they're going to say, yeah, he's off on one of his relationship tangents again. But my perfect example, and we'll talk a little bit later about the development of this Earth Rings product, but it's been about a 1.5 year slug to get the right suppliers on board. We've had lots of failures along the way where the product didn't work. We even took it to the market one time. After about 1.5 months in the field, it didn't work. And we had to go back to the manufacturers and say, we need to redo this. We need to redesign it. We need a better product. all of that is relationships, because I spent many, many, many visits to the paper company, many, many, many visits to the printer and die cutter. I knew their kids, I knew their wives, I knew, what made them tick. And I invested the time in them to know what they needed. And then when I would call them up and say, hey, this isn't going to work, we need to really figure a different way to do this. And they go, we're all in, that's fine. We'll just figure out another way to do it. And that, because they were losing money too, because they just were. I mean, there was product on the floor that they were never going to sell me because it didn't work. So I just hugely depended upon the relationship side in the manufacturing business, or almost any kind of business. On the supplier side, I think we forget about suppliers sometimes, but I think they're equally as important as your return.
Hey, you mentioned about some of your experiences at R Dialing, where you've had some doors open, and just the impacts you've had with the people at your business too. What would you say? What are some of the, or maybe some of these, but maybe some other? What are the 3 or 4 events that maybe have shaped your life?
I think the major things that affect me is when I've either had an incredible opportunity or an incredible challenge. So one of the things that I've done, this sort of has become a habit, is I accept invitations to breakfast or lunch from almost anybody, even if I don't know them. And I spent about 15 years traveling back and forth to Asia doing manufacturing there. I'd go 2 weeks at a time, 6 to 8 times a year, primarily Taiwan and China. And one thing I learned is that striking up conversations with people can be a lot of fun. And if it was on an airplane, if it was on a bus, if it was wherever, one of the things I'd always look for is there a book that they're reading that I can sort of play off of or something like that? I've literally traded books. I've traded Bible studies on planes with people that I've been on for a long time. But one story specifically, I had lunch with a gentleman that I had met through another person, or breakfast actually. And he was supposed to be a project planner. I was looking for a project planner over there. And I found out at breakfast, he was an Anglican pastor in Australia and England for about 15 years before he went back to Hong Kong. Interesting guy. And he goes, by the way, have you ever really had a behind the scenes tour of Hong Kong? I said, no. He goes, let's go. What do you have to do the rest of the day? I go, I literally have nothing to do. Tomorrow I've got to go into mainland China. He goes, well, if you've got the time, I've got the time. We spent the next 10 hours touring Hong Kong, having lunch, having a late dinner, and he took off to go see his family about, 10 o'clock that night, and I went back to my hotel. What I learned from that is, that was probably one of the best days of my life, in that going from not knowing this person at all to him investing in me and this relationship for over 10 hours, 11 hours that day. And then I used him. I kept that relationship with him for quite a while. So that is one of my mantras, is meet people and get to know people on their terms as much as you possibly can. Probably the other thing is, anytime that I'm really, really challenged, I love that. And it's not so much that I am just going to try to handle that on my own, but it gets me to bring in resources, teams, whatever that may be, to try to figure out, how do I handle that and get it to the next stage? We've manufactured a number of things. Cell phones for Motorola. We were the largest manufacturer of display phones for Motorola worldwide for about 15 years. Well, I had to take the business in the U.S. to China. I had to take it actually to Taiwan first and then to China. I had no idea how to do that. But I went and met people. I formed relationships. My partner in Taiwan, who is also the same guy in China, is now one of my best friends and has been for almost 20 years. That's little bit by little bit, being one foot in front of the other. And all of those had some kind of a faith component, because I knew I was safe. Last story. I'm in China. I've been going back and forth to China for a few years, 2 weeks at a time. So I, always had a weekend over. And I had two engineers that worked for me that lived in Hong Kong. And it came up one Friday or one Thursday that one of the guys said, "Hey, I got to go back to Hong Kong. There's something going with my family. So, I need to leave," because normally they would stay over the weekend with me. I said, "Of course, you've got to go. You got to go." And he was the only one with me that time. So I sort of went, am I comfortable doing this? Because typically we would all go back to Hong Kong and then come back into mainland China. And I sort of heard God saying, "What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? I mean, you're in a nice hotel. There's enough people that speak English. You're comfortable walking around the streets. Just stay." And I did. I had a wonderful time. And, I had time to relax. I had time to write. I had time to pray. I had time to just walk around and meet people. And that's what I did for about the next 7 years is I would send my guys home on the weekends and I would stay there by myself. And it was very much of a, God's got my back. I literally stopped worrying about it because, in my opinion, he told me to stop worrying about it. And that's sort of how I live that life. So those are some of the circumstances that have given me the faith and sort of the strength to go where I've gone and, have the opportunity put in front of me, but being willing to take that challenge because of that.
Because you don't have to worry. You don't have that fear anymore.
Yeah, I really don't. I mean, it's not always going to work. It's not always going to be successful, but that's okay. I'm pretty used to bumps along the road. That happens. That's part of being an entrepreneur.
Well, you've talked about challenges. You've talked about opportunities. You've talked about being a entrepreneur and a business owner for more than 40 years now. Tell us a little bit about how someone at that point in their career decides, I am going to come up with an eco-friendly replacement for plastic. I'm going to do my part, and here's how I'm going to do it. Help us understand that decision and how you got there, and how was it born, and then how has it progressed?
So we had already been doing business with craft brewers in Canada, on plastic rings, which was part of our ongoing business. Servicing brewers and liquor stores. And one of the things that we have consistently thought is plastic, because even if you say your plastic is biodegradable or if it's photodegradable, people don't care. They just literally don't. And we sat around in a meeting one day because we knew Canada was going to pass a law that said you had 2 years to replace plastic packaging. And we said, okay, what do you want to do? And we all said, well, what's the alternative? And we said, well, the only thing we can think of is probably cardboard. There was a little bit of cardboard out there in the market that some people were trying to come up with some kind of packaging. So we decided to go in full tilt. My partner, Mike, and I, put the money up. And so basically I went on the road. I had a designer and he was very good at design and engineering. I spent a lot of time trying to find the papers. So I ended up calling all over the place, paper companies, and I found an innovation division that all they do is innovate for the second largest paper manufacturer in the world called International Paper. And I worked with the lady there for about 8 months until we finally got to the place that we could even convince one of their factories to test it. And we did. And I was on site when they did this. And this is literally, they put 3 sheets of paper together on rolls that are 96 inches wide by about 4 feet in diameter. 3 of these things gigantic. It's about the size of a football field, the machine is. And we made some paper. We came back and tested it. And it was awful. It did not work at all. But we kept with it, I was able to take that paper to find somebody to die cut it. That's what my engineer was helping me to do to make sure the rings were going to fit on the cans and that kind of stuff. But that's where back to the relationship issue is I got to know the plant manager really well out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is, if you don't know that, that's a very Christian society or area. It happens to be where I'm from. I'm from the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area originally. My sister lives there, so I had a chance to, spend time with her. Then I had to find people who could do the other processes, printing and die cutting. I found a couple plants that would do that. And we finally then had to have customers. So we had a couple people in Canada that would commit because we had to design and manufacture all the machinery too. And I found a company here in the northern suburbs of Chicago to manufacture the machinery. And, they were all in on doing that. So we got a machine built. We took it up to northern Canada. Typically, an install takes us 3 days. We were there for 3 weeks because, not all installs go the way you want them to. They were excited. We put it out in the marketplace. A month and a half later, they pulled it because about 1 to 2% of the people out in the field, product out in the field, it failed. The rings came out. When it got wet, it didn't hold up the moisture the way it was supposed to and stuff like that. So back to the drawing board. 4 months later, we reintroduced it in the market. Completely new design, completely new paper. And so far of what we know, we have about 15 million rings out in the marketplace. We've had one failure that we've been told about. So the process was, and I've been on my knees quite a bit about this, to God of, how do you expect me to continue doing this? We're losing a ton of money. People don't believe internally. They're fighting it externally. Some of them are scratching their head or walking away from it. And prayer always came back to me, and I'm a morning chair time guy, always came back to me as, keep going. I got you. This is going to work. And it was really stressful, very hard, especially the end of last year. And now, we're in line. We're running. It seems like it's going pretty well. But I really had to rely quite a bit on my faith and express that to the people that I'm with to keep this thing going. But the ultimate is, and here's the one thing that maybe is most important about all this is it's not about the money. I've got 25 people that work for me, and at least half of them are dealing in the plastics side of the business. What? That's going to die. And so cardboard is the replacement side for that. And I often tell everybody that, hey, the reason we're here is so you have a job. We're replacing one product with another product, but this will allow you and it will allow Promac to continue on for as long as we want it or you want it to continue on. It's not about the profit or the money or those kind of things for right now. That's not the long-term goal. And I truly believe that in my heart. That's what gets me up every day is, how do we keep this whole organization moving forward?
That's the fuel that loads you on an airplane to make another trip to Canada, all right, to go deal with another group of challenges or problems somewhere, is helping your people flourish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And understanding the envelope of it, it's not just my people, it's also all of those suppliers that are doing the same thing. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, I am a plant guy. I like being in plants. And, we had trouble with this printer die cutter out in Ohio, and they couldn't solve the problem. And we agreed to hire an expert to come in. And he spent 5 days there. And, typically I'm not sequestered, but I spend most of the time, maybe in a conference room or in meetings or things like that. And I went to the plant manager. I said, what do you want me to do? And he goes, anything you want. Everybody, just go help. Well, I mean, I'm moving skids. I'm helping on the press. I'm trying to learn everything I possibly can. But that's all the relationship side. If they didn't know me and trust me, they would never do that.
Well, and I know on this product, I feel like you've touched on the rings themselves, the paper, the cardboard, the development of that. But you also, obviously came up with the machine that puts them onto the cans as well. It's all, it's a multifaceted solution that you've come up with, not just, the cardboard side of it. There's also the mechanical getting it onto the cans to replace the, so those liquor stores and even the production lines can do that process as well.
Yeah, I mean, a production line, think about it. We put 50 6-packs out of a machine per minute. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And then, yeah, you're right. We have multiple levels. I mean, you could do it at, 2 6-packs a minute, and you do it by hand practically.
Sure.
But those are, you talked before about what's the challenge. You figure out what the engineering challenge is, and then you get the right people around. I'm really good at sketching stuff out and saying, here's what I think we might want to do. And then I get the engineers and the experts in and go, yeah, but we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And go, okay. And that's how it gets better. I can't think better for all that.
So if we got other entrepreneurs listening that have products, and specifically, I guess, products that they think could be a fit in the Canadian market, what's the few headaches that you've encountered that you could help them by giving them a little guidance, or so they don't have to learn those lessons themselves?
So especially in the Canadian market, there's lots of rules and regulations. I mean, if you want to ship anything over the line in Canada, there are multiple tariffs and taxes that you have to deal with. And it's also very expensive to ship into Canada. So little things like don't ship partial truckloads unless you actually have to. Don't expect that it's going to be a regular route. There's not as many routes going into Canada as what we're used to in the US. Oh, I want to get something to LA. Well, I can get you a truck that'll get there in 3 days. I mean, if you want a truck that's going to get to Upper Canada in 3 days, you're going to spend triple that amount. All right. So you try not to do those kind of things. I think that the people are amazing. The people on the line side and the management and that are very, very open and very good, but you have to go to them. They won't come to you. So whether I'm having a corporate meeting or I'm having a meeting on one of the presses, it makes a really big difference when you show up, and you show up more than once. That's a significant issue to them. I think the other thing is there's a lot of regulations government-wise. Some you have to abide by. A lot of them you don't. They're sort of nebulous. I'll give you a really good one, which is recycling. Well, everybody says, there's all these laws about recycling. Yeah. How about composting? There's no laws about composting, none. And the same thing in the US. The only law that is sort of followed in Canada is an Australian law that is nothing more than a guideline for composting. And so I literally spent one time 3 days dealing with one area, another area, another area, another area in the Canadian government to try to get finalized answers on this whole composting thing. And finally, the only answer I got is, yeah, we've got like 14 different districts, and each one of them has a different set of guidelines because each of them have different equipment. And it's really governed by the equipment, not by the government. And I said, so can we put it's home compostable? And that's fine. She goes, sure. There's actually no laws for it. So you got to do your research. You got to dig in and get as many of those answers as you can. And the other thing, which I think is the same thing, like when I was dealing in China, the same thing is you need to get a local. You need to have somebody who is really promoting things for you that is a local, because that's the way the voice is going to be trusted. You'll get to that trust, but initially it's not that easy. Yes.
Well, I can say that I was, and you know this story, but I was in Calgary this summer for a wedding, and I was tasked with picking up some adult libations, and I made my way into the liquor store in Calgary, and lo and behold, I found Earth Rings right there in the cooler. I snapped a picture and sent it to you, and so I know ours was not the one failure that you talked about in your 15 million. Ours was not. It did not fail. It performed terrific. Woohoo! Yeah, good work. It's an excellent product.
Thank you.
Jim, you've had the experience in China and in Canada, and so what would you say is the biggest difference between operating, and working in China versus Canada?
My experience in China was actually good. I love the Chinese people. They're incredibly entrepreneurial, which can be a fault because they always want to make things better. And that can be a problem when you're dealing with an engineered product that you want repeated, because somebody on the line is going, well, I can do this or I can do that, and maybe I can get a couple more pieces out in the ship. And sometimes that's not a good thing. But overall, the fact that they're very entrepreneurial, I think, is a very big plus. In China, you have to have 100% supervision. of what's going on in the plant. You just do. I mean, because things just get out of whack way too easily. Canada, I don't think that's true. And by the way, I think China's modernized quite a bit. I've been back there probably in 8-9 years, but the manufacturing processes are really good. But if it's something that there's a chance that it could be changed much, I highly recommend, pretty constant supervision. Canada, I don't find that. Once they get what you're trying to do, they're really good at it. For instance, would be, we place, a couple $100,000 machines in breweries that are running at a very high speed. We go up and we train their maintenance people, and then we walk away. They rarely call us. They solve it themselves because they understand the parts, they understand how it's working and those kind of things. And they solve the problems just pretty much on their own.
Yeah, so you're still relying on the relationships, but you're managing the different people.
Yeah, for sure. Different circumstances.
Well, shifting gears a little bit, Jim, knowing that the progress with Earth Rings has gotten to where it's gotten. It was not easy, but it's gotten there. Knowing that you are approaching a crossroads in your professional life, where I know you're beginning to consider what does the next step look like? What is it? Is it retirement? You talked about your passion for keeping Promac and all those members of your team going, but my question to you would be, and as you're closer to this than some of our listeners, but many of our listeners will probably be right in the same spot. How do you finish strong? Like, what does that look like for you? And what is, one or two things that you want to be able to kind of hang your hat on as far as your legacy professionally, your business legacy goes, and help us get a little understanding of that.
Legacy is a hard thing. I think for me, if I have a legacy that we gave a lot of people opportunities and we were fair in that process, as far as Promac goes, I mean, we've been up to 160 employees when we were doing assembly line work here before we took it overseas, down to about 25 people now. I think we have what we call boomerangs, people that worked for us before that come back. I think we have 7 of them right now. I've got a number of 25-year employees. I'm celebrating one today. The guy who runs our warehouse has been here 25 years. Those are the kinds of things that I think is the legacy of ran a good business, treated people fairly, gave them opportunities. They raised their families, they're part of the community, all those kind of things. That's, I think, as a business leader, really probably part of what you're supposed to be doing. As I think of, what's the next stage? Sure, the next stage is trying to sell the business. We're in discussion stages about how to go about doing that, whether it's sold as parts or it's sold, individually. I think where we go from there is something my wife and I are trying to figure out. Are we going to spend, which we spend a lot of time now, we just spend time with the grandkids and the family. We're very fortunate. They're all close. They're all here. I have great kids who have great professional careers and are doing really well. So they don't really need us for any of those kind of support mechanisms, except just be around and help when we can. I think for me, my side is I'm not done having impact. So what else can I do to have impact? So I look at part of that for me is I'm a church guy. I like church. I've been involved in leadership in a church, management of a church. My father was lay leader of the church, which I said I would never do. And then, of course, at 35 years old, I was lay leader of a church. So I think that's part of it. I love this convene group that I'm fortunate enough to be part of, that I get to help out mentoring some people. The Global Leadership Conference, where Doug and I met, I've run a group where, we study 1 or 2 of those, or really 2 or 3 of those people for a year. I might start that group up again. That was very fulfilling, I think, to all of us, when we were doing that. Or it might be something in the community. I'm trying to figure that out, but I know God's not done with me yet. I've got lots of energy. I've got time hopefully coming. And I can afford to invest that time sort of wherever I'm being placed. So sort of keeping my ears open and my heart open, praying a lot about it. And that might be the next story, Travis. I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. That's all I can really tell you.
Fair enough. And the kind of the freedom that you're referencing, the freedom to be able to make the impact where you want to make it, is something that I think is present with all entrepreneurs, right? You want to break free from the corporate structure to have the freedom to do that, to have the freedom to integrate faith into your business, to have the freedom to lead in the way that you see fit, right? In the way that you think is best. But then to have the freedom to give your time and to give your resources and to make the impact where you want to make it. And I just commend you on the journey, on what you've built. And I'm excited for you to have that freedom and to continue to make an impact where you see is the most deserving.
Thank you. I'm also excited about it. It'll work. It's just a matter of, how the cards play out here over the next 6 months to a year. I think within a year, hopefully a little bit sooner than that, I think this will be resolved. We'll go forward.
Sure.
Jim, I know we'll be praying for you, and I think back, when we first sat together at the GLS, you shared a book with me, you shared Outlive with me, and great book. I appreciate the book share, it's just great hearing how you're making those impacts on the people that surround you, wherever that might be. If someone wants to reach out to you or learn more about you, where can they learn more about you or reach out to you and learn more about like Earth Rings?
Sure. I mean, my business email I can give, probably the best thing to do, JROUZER at Promac, PROMAC.com, or very simple, Gmail, Jim Rouzer at gmail.com. I love working with people. I love talking to other entrepreneurs. And if there's something I could do to help or I can learn from them, it's always a two-way street. Travis has taught me a lot about things over the short relationship that we've had through Convene. So I'm a person who absorbs all that. Learning is a really part of my life that I need to keep going with. So,
well, you've given us a lot today, Jim, and I thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure to have the conversation with you, and hopefully everyone has learned some stuff from your journey, has taken some inspiration from your messages, and I really can't thank you enough for joining us. So everyone that's listened and that's joined us here today, don't forget to subscribe to our Kingdom Makers podcast if you want to hear more about leaders like Jim, and ways that we can do more than just generate a profit with our businesses. So if you do go ahead and subscribe to any one of the podcast distribution methods, please give us a 5-star rating, and we'd love to see you next time.
All right. Thank you.